For anyone who has their camera turned on, I need to let you know that this session is being recorded and this is going to be published publicly on YouTube and may be included in other digital and print media by the Regional English Language Office of the U.S. Embassy in Lima and the U.S. Department of State in order to promote exchange programs and public diplomacy efforts. If you do not want to appear in the recording, please turn off your camera. So right now we don't have anyone, but if anyone wants to join, this is a warning. If you don't want to appear in the recording, just turn off your cameras and the chat is not going to be recorded. Just in case, for everyone here again, whenever Romina is going to present her screen, you have to double click on the shared screen to make it bigger. So let me introduce you to your speaker today.
Thank you.
She is Romina Maracita. Is that how you pronounce it? Yeah. She's from Buenos Aires, Argentina. She works for the Institute Profesorado IM Science. She has worked at tertiary university level as an EFL teacher and is currently specializing in neuropsychoeducation. Interesting. She's an expert and specialist in English language and the virtual learning environments. Was TESOL certified teacher, ELT program, and EDEV. Is that e-learning?
That's right. That's right. E-learning.
Cool. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us. Welcome, Ramina.
Well, thank you very much, Estefania, first of all, for all your help and support, and to change, obviously. Thanks a lot. And welcome everyone. Welcome all our colleagues that are here with us. Well, thank you for taking part of your time to be here in this session. Well, first of all, let me share my screen so that you know what this webinar and session is about. Give me a second so that you can see it. Okay, great. Very good. Very good. There it goes. Well, as Estefania has already told you, there it is shown on the screen. Remember to double click, yes, on my PowerPoint there, and you will see it bigger. And I think it will be of great help. Anyway, the PDF is also available, and Estefania has already announced that in the chat section. So maybe if it is more comfortable for you, well, you can also download the same presentation in a PDF format. Well, this session is about scaffolding, right? A tool to avoid cognitive load. Well, scaffolding is a very common term. I mean, we all know about scaffolding because even if you have a child near you or a baby, you always scaffold their learning, right? When the baby tries to do something new and you let the child experiment something, but when the child is frustrated, you may offer a little help and maybe break out that new experiment or experience in different tasks so that he can achieve it. And then you will show support and you will make him feel pride out of this discovery or experience. Well, in the same way that we do with a child, in the same way that we scaffold someone in a new job. Whenever you start a new job, there is always a mentor maybe helping you and not throwing all the information to you the first day, hopefully, but maybe trying to help you day by day, little by little, so that you adjust, you adapt yourselves, and then you get going. Well, in the same way, scaffolding is a very useful technique to apply in all our classes, right? It's a very important tool because we may all use scaffolding in our classes. I mean, I'm sure all teachers scaffold all the time, but sometimes in online environments, this becomes a little bit different. It may be sometimes overwhelming for a teacher to identify difficulties, right, in an online environment, especially because we have many students that maybe do not turn their cameras on. So it is very difficult to know if they are following you, if they are if they really understand you, if they are carrying out the task, etc. So scaffolding, they are becomes more difficult because sometimes we do not rely on the body language that we have in face-to-face classes. So it is much more difficult to identify when our students are struggling or are having a hard time. And I really love this quote by Maria Montessori that suggests follow the child, but follow the child as his leader, right? The child or the student, I mean, no matter the age here, the student knows, right, the path to follow, and we have to help him or her. Why do we have to adapt to their way of learning? Because we have to adapt to their brains and how their brains process information. If we adapt to that, scaffolding will be successful and autonomy will be reached in the long term. So that's why this is very, very important. This session will be divided into two different sections. In section 1, we will see the definition of scaffolding. We will talk about cognitive load and how important the role of stress is in the classroom, because stress and scaffolding are highly related. We're going to answer the questions what and why. I mean, why should we scaffold in our classes? And in our second section, we are going to answer the question how. Well, now, how do I do it? And we're going to discuss different tips and some useful apps or websites to really make it happen. We're going to analyze some examples from authentic material, and we're going to try to create a safety net for our students, because that is what scaffolding is all about. I would love to keep in touch with all of you. So if you have any questions or queries or doubts there, you have my email, rominamaracita@gmail.com, or my name and surname in social media. And well, I would love to hear from all of you. Okay, so let's go to our first section, yes, scaffolding and cognitive load. Now, what is this about? Scaffolding includes all the things that we do when we predict the kinds of difficulty that the class or individual students will have in a given task. Scaffolds are temporary support, right? When we see that the student can reach, can achieve their goal, okay, we remove the support, because, I mean, scaffolding is not permanent. It should be, and it must be temporary. Why? Because our goal, our ultimate goal, is autonomy. So we have to always remember this, that scaffolding is temporary. It's a temporary support that will guide them in their learning. Some interesting facts as regards scaffolding is that it is usually defined as a temporary structure, right? Often put up in the process of constructing a building. That's where the origin of the word comes from. And when the new building is finished, right, the scaffolding is taken down. But even though it is temporary, it is essential for the construction of the building. And that's why scaffolding is essential for our classes, especially in online environments. So the important thing is to know when and how to intervene. And that is what scaffolding is all about. It's about the teacher, yes, taking an informed and active role in guiding students and learning, yes, teaching them to come to terms with their learning process. This is very important because sometimes we may interfere with the process of learning. So we should very well know when and how to intervene and how to do it. Scaffolding is related in general, and I am sure all my colleagues will be familiar with Vygotsky, with the zone of proximal development. Yes, it is related because in general there are three different stages. The stage of I can do this, I can do it alone, no problem, and the student can carry out the task without any kind of intervention, or I can do it, but with help, right? With some guidance, with scaffolding, or really, this is too much for me and I cannot do it. I mean, I cannot even deal with the task myself, right? So these three phases, right, and stages are very important to take into account and to identify in our students. Now, there are different types of scaffolding, right? Different types in the sense in which scaffolding can help in our classrooms. And Jumat and Tassir in 2014, they explained the 4 different types of scaffolding that we may encounter. We have procedural scaffolding, conceptual, strategic, and metacognitive. Now we're going to deal with them one by one, but anyway, remember that in general, they may overlap, and maybe we are scaffolding one type, but we are also scaffolding another type. So this is just a classification, but in general in classes, we may overlap these types of scaffolding. Procedural scaffolding is very important, especially in an online environment. This helps students use the tools available. It helps the learners understand the course environment, right? For example, if you use Zoom or Google Meets or any platform for live sessions, students have to know how to interact, because without interaction, I cannot identify any difficulty they may have, and I cannot apply any scaffolding technique. So even though our students may be digital natives, right, they may not be confident enough as to know how to interact in a learning environment, which is different from the environments that they usually manage or deal with. So, for example, we should be explicit. We shouldn't take things for granted, and we should encourage them to use the chat if they are not confident enough to turn their cameras on, to answer with an emoji if they are following you, to, for example, tell them that they can contact you by email or the chat section or a meeting that you may organize for them. But they have to know this, because if not, students just maybe they are there, but they do not interact, right? So there are many ways of interacting in a virtual environment, maybe not all the time with their videos or their audios, but the chat section sometimes is very powerful, especially for teenagers who may not sometimes feel so confident, with their cameras on as well. And the most important thing for a successful procedure is to establish a class routine. Yes, to establish an agenda, to tell them, well, okay, this is our routine, this is how we start the class, this is what we are going to do and to deal with. Routines are great for the brain. Our brain loves routines, right? Our brain is very basic in routines. So our brain doesn't like change. So once the brain knows what is happening, well, the brain feels safe and there is no stress. Right? That's why, for example, in kindergarten, it's very important to establish routines, because children feel safe, or at home. Yes, routines provide safety. And this is about providing a safety net in this online environment that may be really new for them. And this also includes modeling and practicing, right? We have to model more. We have to tell them how things are done, because in a face-to-face class, it is different. But here, they will only rely maybe on our modeling. So this is, again, very important. And not only the teacher can model, but students can as well. Peer work, collaborative work here is a must, because when we interact with others and when we work in a collaborative way, our brains work better. We pay more attention, we are more engaged, and we are more motivated. The second type of scaffolding is a conceptual scaffolding, right? This helps learners to decide what is important in learning. And again, this is very important, for example, in reading. Sometimes students are overwhelmed when they see a long test and they maybe haven't even started reading it, and they say, oh no, this is too much, right? Because it's like overwhelming for them. So again, we have to maybe break it up. Yes, maybe break up the text in different parts. We may use map tools, and we may use visual scaffolding, right? We must help them to visualize the information. Again, especially in an online environment where Image is everything here. So we must help them understand things in a different way. And these will provide them with many paths for knowledge retrieval. Then we're going to see it in a minute, right? How our brain works and how our brain processes information. And there we will learn how we must give time for the brain to interact with that information. The third type would be strategic scaffolding. And this suggests alternative ways for the students to tackle the learning problems they encounter, giving them learning strategies, taking into account their learning preferences. Of course, we may not be able to cope with all their preferences in one class, especially when we have large classes, but maybe doing the same activity, but through different ways. With a video, with a text, with a hands-on experience, with an online experiment. Working and going through different channels may give them the opportunity to experience learning in different ways. And maybe for one, the visual aid was enough, and for the other one, the video was more effective. So we need to provide many opportunities to recycle, yes, to offer, and so that we know that everyone will benefit at some point in the class, right? And last but not least, we go to metacognitive scaffolding. Now, this is essential because it guides students in their thinking process. They need to be aware of what they are doing and of what they are learning. This involves 3 different phases, such as planning, monitoring, and evaluation. Planning has to do with, well, analyzing, well, why we are doing this. I mean, what's the purpose? Yes, what's the goal? Well, and have a look. We will learn this because we will need it in order to achieve that final task, right? And motivating them. They have to see the need for that. Monitoring. This is easier in virtual environments because if you have breakout rooms, if you have the opportunity to divide them in groups and they can work collaboratively, you can really monitor all of them practically at the same time, even in a writing, right? In writing, when they write in Google Docs, maybe it's a very simple way of maybe monitoring writing and seeing interact, right? All of them again at the same time. And finally, evaluation. Well, going back to what they have learned, was it meaningful? Was it useful? Was it too difficult, too easy? Was it challenging or not? Well, always this question of the reflection, right? That sometimes it is called the exit ticket in every class that we may organize just to give them a hint as to, well, let's stop for a second and tell me, was it useful or not, right? And again, to give them time to process all this information. Okay, so let's go to the why, right? Why should we care about this? Well, scaffolding may provide learners with an opportunity to avoid stress in the classroom, since it gives them tools to go step by step, just what our brains need. The brain needs a predictable structure, and the brain loves doing one thing at a time. We may feel very proud of our multitasking abilities, but the brain doesn't like it, remember? So we have to avoid stress, right? The brain loves to do one thing at a time, especially when learning. So this is very important to take into account. Why? Well, because this is what happens in our brain, right? When we are stressed, I mean, if I feel that, suppose, the task is too difficult for me, I read a text and I only understand it 20%. I'm embarrassed maybe to share my doubts. I may be afraid that maybe my teacher will point at my mistakes and not see them as part of a process, so I'm not comfortable. I feel also isolated at home. I do not have like that peer, yes, and those mates next to me. So the student might feel much more isolated. Imagine all that together, that provokes stress. And stress is very harmful, first of all, for the brain, and second, to learning, right? Especially, it's something that we teachers want to avoid in the classroom because it is harmful. Stress activates the amygdala. The amygdala is something we have inside our brains, the size of a nut. And it turns on, the amygdala turns on the fight or flight response. The amygdala is there to tell us, well, come on, there is a threat. What do we have to do, right? So if that is activated because of stress, it strengthens the connection with the hippocampus that is involved in learning, in memorizing and learning processes, and it weakens the connection with the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the one that carries out the executive functions to evaluate, to monitor, to understand, to synthesize, to compare, all the things we need to do in the class. So imagine that if stress is really high, the prefrontal cortex doesn't work properly. Therefore, learning and information processing is very, very difficult, okay? Here we have it like a sort of summary. The response to short-term stress is critical for survival. That's why the amygdala is very important, because if we have a threat, the amygdala knows what to turn on in our brain. But this powers this flight or fight response, right? And in general, this allows animals to respond quickly to danger signs, for example. But when we are startled, we are confused, and our fear center of the brain is activated, okay, this is not what we want, because if our hormone cortisol goes up, right, and attention is blocked, well, information processing is not the best, and information processing will not take place. Therefore, scaffolding is very important to avoid this cognitive load in our brains, to avoid that feeling that we cannot do something, and to avoid stress as well. Well, and we come here to the term cognitive load. Our brain needs buffer time. This buffer time is extra time in learning, for example, that we allow our students to get ready for the task, right? For example, in writing, the pre-writing stage. In speaking, also a pre-speaking stage where they can mentally organize their thoughts, they can take down notes, they can compare with their partners, etc. And then we go to the speaking task. Because this buffer time leads us to avoid cognitive load. What's cognitive load? Well, cognitive load relates to the amount of information that working memory can hold at one time. So I suggested that since working memory is limited, now we're going to see how it works. It's really, really limited. It has a limited capacity. Well, instructional methods should avoid overloading it with additional activities, with too much information at the same time, because that wouldn't contribute directly to learning. Now, whenever, yes, we utter something to our students, yes, whenever we present language to them, any type of incoming information, yes, has 3 stages in our brain. And we are lucky if we get to the last one, because 70% of the information we hear or see is lost in the middle. 70%. So that's quite a lot. So we may think that, wow, we are doing a great job, but in our students' brain, well, much of that information is lost. So we have to try to find like opportunities, right, to recycle, to revise, and to attract them to go over that content again. Incoming information has to go to our sensory memory, first of all, right? Now, that is the first filter. And what happens? Nowadays, our sensory memory is like closed. It's like a window, but it is closed in general all the time. Why? Because we are bombarded with information. Yes, have a look through the phone, for example, through our smartphones, anything. It's information all the time. So our sensory memory is just closed. When we start the class, we need to open that window. Imagine a window. We need to open that window, because if not, whatever you say, yes, will go by unnoticed, right? So we have to open the window. How? Our sensory memory likes novelty, likes surprise, yes, likes images, likes videos, right? Something that appeals to the senses. So we must look for different ways to begin the class so as to open that window, open that channel. When that information really succeeded and went through the second stage, here we go to the working memory. That, remember, it has a limited capacity. So here scaffolding is essential, right? Why? Because if we break up tasks in different parts, if we help students in the way, right? If we try not to overload the student with too much information, instructions, sometimes we speak too much, right? And therefore, yes, remember that our working memory is limited. So there we need to practice, practice, and practice. In the same way, no, obviously. I mean, the brain loves repetition, but it's not like they repeat after me. Repetition through different channels, yes, through different senses, with a hands-on experiment, with something we might comment, with a video, with an image, with some collaborative work, with interaction, different interaction patterns in the classroom. But we need to rehearse and practice all the time. The brain needs this a lot. So part of this information that was successful there enough and it got to the working memory will be encoded to the long-term memory. Yes, that is like the last filter. Now, what happens once it is encoded in the long-term memory, it must then be retrieved, because the next time you work with that topic, you will have to retrieve information from the long-term memory that will be like a two-way connection with your working memory. So this is constant recycling and practicing. Scaffolding should include many moments, right, of revising, of recycling, so that a lot of information could be encoded in our long-term memory. That is essential. Now, remember that when our brain processes information, it categorizes that information and moves it into long-term memories in knowledge structures known as schemas. Now, these organize information according to how you use it. So the more you use it, yes, the better stored it will be. So what do we need here? Novelty. Visual aids to wake up our sensory memory in every class. Relevant info. The brain always activates the fight or flight response. Remember the one from the amygdala, whether the information is relevant for its survival or not. So if the brain considers, okay, this is not relevant for me, I don't need it, out immediately. Yes, and again, your students will be there, but their brains will not be there. Right? So this is very important to take into account. We have to make things relevant. Sometimes we have to give it a twist to any learning topic to make it relevant. If they do not think it is relevant, they will not really carry out the task successfully. And emotions, work with emotions, emotional check-ins at the beginning of the classroom. There are many techniques for that. Scaffolds for the working memory, use visual scaffolding, procedural scaffolding, right? Create a safety net, a parachute, so that students are not launched there in a task in a virtual environment, but provide them with lots of tools they can get support from, right? And again, use, apply, and recycle. Use, apply, and recycle, because then again, that is the best way for our students to learn. Now, in the second section, we will analyze, well, how do I carry this out? Now, I selected just a few resources for an obvious question of timing, but there are many, many others. And maybe if you are using some of these resources, please comment it on the chat, and maybe you have others that we can include as well. One of the ideas is that, and maybe an advantage, I think, from virtual environments, is that we have more opportunities to make everyone participate. And there, especially if you have large classes, of course. And there you may see what's going on to apply scaffolding. Here, for example, we have our first three resources we are going to comment today: Edpuzzle, Pictochart, and Neopot. Edpuzzle is a wonderful website, and here one of our colleagues says they use Edpuzzle. Yes, because it is great. For example, this Edpuzzle that I have prepared for a group of upper intermediate students, we were dealing with a unit about flying, right, and flying tips, and the purpose was the use of narrative tenses, so they had to retell an anecdote. And well, at the beginning, we used the book, right, our material, but I wanted something authentic, so I found an interview with Jennifer Aniston and Ellen DeGeneres, in which Jennifer Aniston was retelling an anecdote from one of her flights, because she's really afraid of flying, so she suffers in every flight. And it was a wonderful anecdote about something that happened on her flight on her way to Mexico. Now, the anecdote was great. It was more or less 3 minutes and a half or 4 minutes, but I thought that maybe my students were not going really to get, right, the whole interview, because even though they have an upper intermediate level, there were lots of words and lots of overlappings, and they might find it difficult. So in Edpuzzle, what you do is you just copy the link from YouTube, and literally in 5 minutes, you have your scaffolded activity. You can stop the video at any moment and add a question. Yes, an interactive question. It could be a multiple choice, an open-ended question, right? True or false. And the student, when he or she is watching the video, well, the video will be paused, the question pops up, and he or she will have to choose the right answer. Now, if the answer is not chosen correctly, the video will be replayed till they get the correct response, and then they can go on. This is great, not only for scaffolding, especially with listening, but also to avoid embarrassment, because here every student is working on their own link. So they have opportunities to replay the video, to do it again, to see why they did it okay or not. Sometimes if we do the same as a whole group activity, maybe we have one or two participating, raising their hands and saying, yes, yes, me. And they maybe say and blurt out the answer, and the rest is like, well, I didn't even have time to think of the answer, because many of them needed more time really to utter the answer. So this is great because they work on their own, and you can see really, I mean, the time they need, the difficulties they have, and you can scaffold any video in your own way. It depends on what you want to focus, right? So that is one of the websites which I find great for scaffolding. Pictochart has to do with conceptual scaffolding. This question of providing visual aids, right, for our students to complement what we say. And this resource is great for reading, for example. After reading a text and working on it, sometimes students find going back to the text a little bit boring. They may read it once or twice, but then if they have to do something with it, they say, oh, I have to read it again, right? And they may find that rather boring. So one of the possibilities is to use Pictochart or any other, because there are many really that provide visual aids. And in here, they create their own infographic. So they can be working in groups, they are given a text, maybe they have worked on in class, and they can create their own infographic of that text. And without even noticing, they will go back to the text many times, because you have to find the information you want to show. You may have to find some specific number or date or surname of someone you're speaking about. So this is a visual teaching tool. It can help students organize information. It's easy to understand because Pictochart is really user-friendly, and you just choose the template and you just fill in with the right words. And students may use lots of language functions. They may compare, they may contrast, they may exemplify, they may describe, define, etc. Yeah, so from a reading test, you can have a variety of activities later on. And they can convey a complex idea in a simple way, right? Even assigning different texts to different groups, and then maybe showing and displaying that on a virtual classroom, comparing again. It can be an ongoing task. So Pictochart is great for collaborative work as well. Then Neopot, the same as Pear Deck, yes, they are very similar. They are great sources. Neopot is a wonderful website that provides a hands-on experience, really, because you upload your PowerPoint or presentation or slide, and you again add questions, right, to the slides that you wish your students to concentrate on or to focus. And they will again, while they are going through the slides, they will have to stop, think, and answer the question, for example. And this is great because next to each student, you yes, as a teacher, you have like a green dot or a red dot, right? So maybe you have a large class that happens here, for example, at universities that we may have like 70 students per session or more. So imagine it's impossible to make all of them participate, but with Neopot you can, because you have like a green dot next to the name. And if the student is working on your slide, yes, you just share a link with them, and everyone opens in their own device and they work on it. If you have the green dot, it means that the student is participating and he's progressing. And if you have a red dot, it's like this, it means that the student went away and maybe they got distracted and opened another website. So it's a good way of also monitoring their work and knowing if they are really doing and performing the task. And it is great for scaffolding because it gives students time to think about the answers, right? And time to reflect on what is difficult or easy with them. Then you can have percentages, statistics about, well, this question, nobody answered that question in a correct way. Well, maybe it was too difficult. You can again, maybe also monitor your own teaching and say, well, maybe the question wasn't clear, or maybe they couldn't understand it. Well, why? And I think it provides like instant feedback. And if you see that students get stuck, you can also share it in an online session and they can all work together at the same time. So it has like two different modes, which I think they can be really, really successful in our classes. So Neopot is a great way. Okay, and the next one here is lovely for metacognitive scaffolding. Yes, metacognitive scaffolding can be sometimes difficult to carry out in a virtual environment because, again, maybe you have a class once a week, but then the student is alone at home. And the idea of metacognitive scaffolding is providing the student with tools on how to learn, right? So this app is called, you have it on the right of the PPT slide, Study Bunny, right? It's a free app you can download to your cell phone, for example. And Study Bunny is a bunny, yes, that helps you to study. It's simple as that. And it acts like a sort of teacher, but at home, because you set specific time, specific number of minutes that you want to focus and in which you have to carry out a task, and you set the bunny. If you fulfilled your goal, you could focus on those minutes, suppose 15, 20 minutes in carrying out the task and everything, you earn coins. And with those coins, you can buy decorations for your bunny, rooms, etc., etc. It works like that. And if you feel demotivated, it will surprise you with motivational quotes, etc. And by the end of the week, as you can see there in the screen, you have statistics. Yes, okay, well, this is all the time you could focus, or this is when you got distracted. And it also blocks notifications from and pop-ups from other apps. So this is also wonderful to help students to concentrate and evaluate their own learning. It's like an aid, like you're giving them another tool to focus, because sometimes it's not that they can't focus, they don't know how. So again, we have to be explicit and to find a new way of making them learn, right? So this is an example for metacognitive scaffolding. Okay, in your PDF doc, you will have all the bibliography I used here for more information, of course. And I would like to end with this quote by Katie Walker: "To know how to scaffold is to know how to teach." And I think that all teachers, we are so used to scaffolding, and we should remind ourselves to continue doing that in order to get the best of our students and to provide them with really meaningful opportunities and a pleasant experience in the classroom. Because again, learning has to be an experience, right? It has to be an experience. So that's why we need scaffolding to help them a little bit more, especially in online environments. So thank you very, very, very much for being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Romina. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're
I've
welcome.
been seeing some comments like people who use
Yes.
Edbutton, use Jigsaw. Have you used Jigsaw?
Yes.
Then I saw someone.
Yeah, Jigsaw. Yes, Jigsaw. Also, There is another one. I don't know if somebody commented on the chat there, a Jamboard, for example, that you
yeah.
can use, which is free and it provides great opportunity also for interaction. Yes,
Interact.
that's another tool. Mm-hmm.
For whiteboards, I used iDrew. I don't know if many people do, but it's just a whiteboard. It's less for drawing and writing and stuff like that.
Yes,
It's a little bit
yes,
more
exactly.
disorganized than Jamboard maybe, but it's freer. So I don't know if yeah.
Yes.
You are in here,
Hey,
so hi.
Mm-hmm. Hi, pleased to meet you.
hi, nice to meet you, Romina. Um, Thank you for sharing with us. It was a very great presentation, and I have learned a lot of techniques and strategies to scaffold students. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, it's my questions is I think personally, I actually teach writing, so I do have a lot of students coming to me with their draft and asking for comments before their
Mhm.
actual assessment. And my challenge is always about the number of tasks that we have to um, read and provide our comments. So I think scaffolding is a great concept. I mean, all the teachers are basically doing that. But the challenge is how do we actually deal with the huge number of tasks that we have to that comes to
Mhm.
us as a teacher, because usually there's only one teacher in the class and then we have to deal with a lot of students, and in colleges and universities and students will have to do a lot of writing tasks. And
Yes,
I think all of us have gone through it. We have a lot of tasks to provide our comments and feedback.
sure.
And I know students do appreciate our teachers to give detailed comments. But the challenge for me is how do we actually give our scaffolding, given the fact that the number of tasks that we have to check and read one by one
Yes.
is huge.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
yeah, what do you think about that?
Mhm. Okay, you are speaking particularly about writing, for
Yeah,
example,
writing.
just to take an example, right? Okay, for example, in writing, I think that, well, in all the areas, one of the best or the most important things is to, we need careful planning and we need to prioritize, because, I mean, we need to prioritize, well, what we really want from this task, right? And after we have our goal, well, we need to plan our objectives as to how to get there. But for example, in writing, maybe a useful thing is, as for example, if we do process writing, right, which is very useful. For example, there we will have plenty of opportunities to scaffold. But maybe if you have large classes, as I also have large classes, for example, at university, and this happens, maybe I divide the tasks throughout, I mean, in many weeks. So for example, if students have to deal with academic writing, I divide the different even paragraphs of academic writing or parts, right, in different weeks. And we, in our live sessions, for example, I try to use Neopot or Pear Deck for maybe them to have like an instant feedback from them, right? Because there you can instantly check if they understood the concept or not. But as regards feedback, for example, here at university, we use Google Docs because it is the one that maybe everyone, it's like the user-friendly one.
Yeah.
So maybe there we take like once a week to read and comment. Anyway, we break up the task in different weeks, right? So maybe, I don't know, an academic essay is carried out in 5 different weeks, right? So students have plenty of time like to go back and to change and to interact. And then there is a week when we do peer correction. So they have another student's points of view on their own writing. So we prioritize maybe in a task, for example, well, what we want from this essay. I mean, are we aiming at collaborative learning? Are we aiming at peer correction? Because it is something that, for example, we need to develop. Are we aiming at accuracy, content, and to prioritize feedback on that aspect? Because of course, sometimes to cover everything would be impossible if we have 70 students, for example, in one class, right?
Thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
for sharing.
Mhm.
I have a question.
I'm actually teaching IELTS writing tasks, so I do separate different theories and different parts of the two IELTS tasks into different weeks. But the
Yes.
challenge always is the number of students at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
I'm not worried about the number of technological tools that we have. I know we have a lot of great tools online that we can
Yeah.
provide feedback on. My Google document will be one of them. It's just that,
Yes.
having to deal with the amount of students is very
Surely.
challenging.
Surely. Sometimes what some teachers organize or do is not to have all their students writing at the same time. I mean, maybe a group will be working on other skills such as presenting something to their mates, for example, in a live session, etc. And a group is developing their essay writing, suppose. So you have like a fixed number of students, like in a sort of carousel, right? But for you as a teacher, you can concentrate on a smaller group, maybe.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We have someone. Wait. Yeah, there he is. Hi.
Hi.
Hello, pleased to meet you.
Yes. Well, I just joined, so I'm not very sure what was the talk about. But as I can see in the title, it says scaffolding virtually. I'm quite interested in this. So if you can just put in a nutshell what this means.
Yes, of course. What we have been talking about is scaffolding in virtual environments and how important it is to scaffold and to provide tools for our students to break up tasks in different parts, in general, to avoid cognitive load in the brain and to avoid stress in the classroom. Something to highlight is that if we are stressed, we cannot pay attention, we cannot be engaged, and we cannot learn. So we must avoid stress in the classroom, and scaffolding may provide you with a tool to achieve that.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I have a question. Does it have like the level of the students influences in any sense what we can do with scaffolding or no?
I mean, the level of experience from the teacher, you mean?
No, like for example, if we have a mixed class with mixed levels, how?
Mixed ability class.
Yes.
Yes, that's right. Well, there in a mixed ability class, for example, scaffolding would be essential, but they are maybe using the same resource, suppose, just in a listening activity, just to mention an example. For example, in the example that I showed from Edpuzzle, you can have with the same video 4 different tasks, and maybe depending on your level, you will be working with a different link. So all of them watch the same video, but maybe your questions, Stefania, are different from the ones that Danny has, right? So maybe I can work with a large class and trying to cater for their needs. It is obviously a bigger effort for the teacher, but really Edpuzzle is very practical, for example, for listening, and you can design your own activity with the same video, different activities, and in that way you can see that everyone participates. Yes, and that everyone can take advantage of that video.
Okay, makes sense. So it's just like creating different tasks, but performed at the same time.
It's a way. Also remember that scaffolding, aside from the 4 categories that we have shown, we also have social and emotional scaffolding. And this is very important in mixed ability classes, or for example, with students with learning difficulties, because social and emotional scaffolding also means teaching them how to approach, right, the other. So have a look. Your mate maybe finds this difficult. How can we help him? Well, and there you are scaffolding. I mean, you are providing someone with the support to deal with the situation in the class. And this might help, because if not, it is just segmenting activities. And the idea is that all of us can work collaboratively. So social and emotional scaffolding can also be there to help the teacher to make all the group get and achieve that same aim, and to achieve that social glue that we need in the group, that sense of belonging and security, therefore, as a result.
Cool. So like we can put them like, according to what they need, but also together. So that's cool.
Yes, I think that is our aim, because we must make them work collaboratively and make them help each other and provide tools for them to work together and to benefit from each other, from their learning experiences, from their different abilities. But that should be, I think, our ultimate goal.
I have a question. What happens when, from what Stefania says, multi
multi-ability classes,
right,
maybe.
yes, okay. What happens
Or
if
mixed
you
ability.
have mixed ability? There you go. What happens if you have students who don't speak the same language, who are not, for example, Spanish speakers, and they speak other languages, and then you have them mixed together, where the majority, of course, are Spanish speakers, but then you have others who speak Spanish, and you as a teacher speak Spanish, and therefore, how do you deal with those?
Yes, because you cannot use your first language as a resource, you mean?
No, of course not.
There as a teacher, where their scaffolding should go visual. I mean, visual scaffolding should or might, yes, give you a certain help or aid, so as to maybe help them understand certain concepts. I mean, scaffolding as regards visual aids, images, videos, so as to sometimes, for example, avoid translation, because there it wouldn't be possible or meaningful for the student.
Correct.
Yes, so I think visual scaffolding, they are map tools. The question of visualizing information could be of great help.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
I think Luis Alberto Figueroa wrote on the chat. I don't know if you can read it. Do you want me to
which one, sorry?
Luis Alberto wrote not that long ago.
Scaffolding helps, here I can read, yes, now I see it. Scaffolding helps students learn as much as they can or as much as they want. I mean, it helps students acquire or learn. It went up and I couldn't read it. Let me do it again. Scaffolding helps students learn as much as they can or as much as they want. I mean, it helps students acquire or learn the L2 as much as they are able to. Am I right? I'm not sure of maybe what the question is about. I think that it's not clear the part of as much as they can or as much as they want. I think that if I interpret the question in the right sense, I think that we always have to do the best scaffolding possible for each student to get their full potential. I mean, and to maximize their potential. Maybe each of them will achieve that potential in different steps, and maybe many of them will need just some scaffolding, and that's all, and others will need many more steps in the way. I think that is a question of prioritizing and knowing what they need, because if we cannot know or identify their needs, maybe it is not possible for us to provide a right scaffolding and to know when and how to intervene. Because sometimes maybe in providing lots of scaffolding techniques and activities and tools, we may hinder their autonomy. So that is something that we also have to be careful about. I mean, if we see that the student can do it alone, well, great. I mean, we don't hold it back there. I mean, there we have to make a difference maybe and act accordingly.
So probably like not all the students will get to the same goal at the end of the year, right?
That's right. But the important thing is that surely the important thing is that learning is a lifelong process, and this is a continuum. So it's not like how much they could get or to which level they could get at the end of a school year, for example. But if they could improve, if they could make progress, if they felt safe in the classroom, right? That's if they had a good learning experience. Because if the learning experience is positive, they will be more motivated, and they will be motivated to continue their learning process. Mhm.
Cool. So do you think that's I don't know if contradictory, but do you think that's doable in the normal education system? Because sometimes like
Yes,
teachers are
of
just
course.
asked for a certain level,
Yes,
certain grades, certain like everyone has to
Standardized.
exactly. Yes, that's right. Yes, yes, yes. I mean, in general, well, I don't know if in all countries, but in many countries, for example, in my country as well, this question of standards, yes, that are so hard to meet because nowadays we have a boom with differentiated instruction, with the concept of flipped learning, flipped classrooms, and making the learner, the student, the center of the classroom, but really making the learner the center of the class. I mean, not just as a way of saying it, but as making them protagonists. So I think that each of them can contribute in a different way, right? In a different way to the class to feel more motivated and to maximize their potential and to get to the top. Everyone maybe not at the same time, but the important thing, and I think that our message should be to them, not to make them feel frustrated to get into a standard and maybe, well, you cannot reach that standard now in April, but you will do it in November. But the important thing is that you will be motivated to reach it and that your journey, I mean, because it's not the result, that journey is also meaningful to you and that you feel safe in that journey.
Awesome. So this is like actually focusing on the learning process and that's
Exactly.
what everyone
Mhm.
can do. Cool. So I don't know if anyone has any other question. We're already like on the time to
Mhm.
finish.
Yes,
So
time.
I just,
Great.
and if no one else asks anything, I just wanted to say thank you very much, Romina, for joining us. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us. I think this is very, very important in like the whole learning process, and not many people pay attention to it that much. When we're like, as you said, forced to meet standards and stuff like that. But it's
Well,
very important to have this point of view of like what's the real important
well,
thing.
thank you very much, Stefania, for all your work and support in every step, right? And thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity, for giving me the chance to meet colleagues all around the world. So that is a wonderful opportunity. Thanks a lot.
Thank you everyone for joining as well.